Okay. Hello, everybody. I am so delighted to bring on today's guest from Toronto, Mike. It's Mike Mandel, and I will actually give the stage to you, Mike, and you introduce yourself and just briefly introduce yourself, your name, profession, and your role in hypnotherapy, and
Yes.
maybe share a little bit of your background and what initially sparked your interest in hypnotherapy, and a little bit of personal experiences with
Sure.
hypnosis and how it has actually impacted your life in a positive way.
Excellent.
Okay, the stage is
Yes.
yours, Mike. Mike
Thank you.
Mandel from Toronto.
Well, let's begin with one tiny correction. Technically born in England, and
Oh, really?
we moved to Toronto in 1957. We came over by ship, and my father
Wow.
was an ex-British Army engineer and worked in Toronto. And we came over by ship, my mother, my sister, and I. And then my life was essentially normal, other than the fact that when I were a little boy, I spoke like this all the time because we come from the north of England. And then when I go
What
to
age were
school,
you then?
I was 4. But you had the
Wow.
accent all the time at home. We spoke like this to each other. It's just what we did. And then you go to school and I got to be Canadian. And then I come home with my friends. Which person am I? Ah. So the interesting thing was, it was 1965, summer of 1965, when I was 12 years old. And my father let me buy any book I wanted. And he thought I watched too much television. I bought a book on hypnosis by Walter Gibson, who was a good magician too. And I learned this book, The Key to Hypnotism. And as a 12-year-old boy, went out looking for someone to hypnotize. And I found my
Wow.
friend
Yeah.
Wayne Gibbs across the way, above the Animal Hospital on Victoria Park Avenue, Toronto. It's still there. And his brother, Max, was his younger brother. So Wayne must have been 9 or 10. Max was a little younger. I said, "Can I hypnotize you?" They didn't even know what I meant. But my very first attempt, Veronica, he was such a good subject. His hand was cataleptic and numb, and I pushed a hat pin through the flesh of his finger. I mean, right through the muscle. Not, I mean, well, there's no muscles, but it's all connective tissue in your fingers, but pushed right through. And it's bleeding, and he's looking at it, and no discomfort. And I
Wow.
thought this was really cool, but his parents didn't think it was so cool. So I
We
didn't
used to
do it
do
much.
that as kids, actually, but we just kind of caught the skin with
Oh
the
no, we
needle.
went right through the
Oh,
flesh, like we're blood, and
oh
yeah,
God.
yeah. So I didn't do much. I messed with it off and on until I was 18. And I was at a party and hypnotized some people and got an amazing result. And then I became obsessed with it. And then I had an office job in Toronto, but I was doing hypnosis on the fly on my own. But no one taught me. So I didn't know what was possible and what wasn't. And we'll come back to that point. So I was coming up with different techniques. And January 1975, I did a hypnosis show, appeared on television in Western Canada on independent television with some, jazz singers and a CIA agent. And it was fantastic. I had a blast because I was earning $90 a week as a telephone operator in Toronto. And all of a
Wow.
sudden, I got a chance to do shows, and a friend of mine got me doing performances for $100. It was so much money for 1.5 hours work. So the bug bit, but I have lived, eaten, breathed hypnosis since 1975. And so now I'm coming up to 71 in 2 months. My joke, because I had a flat tire with my car, and my license plate, Ontario license plate, is hypnosis. And I
Ah,
pulled into a tire place to get the tire changed. And it was a kid about 17 with straggly hair. The band Slipknot was his shirt. And I said, "Hey, I like Slipknot." He said, "You know Slipknot?" I said, "Yeah, cool. I like the first album." He said, "I don't listen to it anymore. It makes me violent." I said, "I don't listen to it anymore for the same reason." He said, "Oh, your license plate says hypnosis. Are you a hypnotist?" Well, there's many humorous lines like, "No, I sell shoes. I just like the license plate." But I said, "No, I am the God Hypnos in human form, come to Earth to help people." And this kid goes, "Cool." So I started telling all my students to say that when people ask me if they do hypnosis. But in reality, Veronica, I did all the trainings. I studied Ericksonian hypnosis with the late, great Derek Balmer, my mentor. He died in 2000. I studied B-set-free fats with Larry Nims in California. I studied mirroring hands with Richard Hill. I did Tad James's timeline therapy, but hypnosis was my specialty. In fact, as an Ericksonian hypnotist primarily, this is a brick from Milton Erickson's house in Phoenix, Arizona. It's like,
Wow.
so when people say they're obsessed with hypnosis, I say, no, I'm obsessed with
I
hypnosis.
love Ericksonian style as well.
It's wonderful. So I've been doing it. We built Mike Mandel Hypnosis Academy 12 years ago, Chris Thompson and I,
Yeah.
and we teach 5-day architecture of hypnosis intensives in Toronto twice a year, May and November, but the rest of our students are
Wow.
online.
A lot happening online.
Yeah, yes.
Even
It,
therapy.
even
Even
therapy.
therapy.
Yeah, that's right. Zoom is a great method for helping people. It's a great platform.
Yeah, like a few years ago, you wouldn't even think about it.
No.
What's your own experience, personal experience? How hypnotherapy impacted your life?
Okay. Well, I started.
Meaning, did it do any healing or,
Not for me, but for many, many other people, as you can imagine. I became an NLP practitioner in 1992. Then, when I met my mentor, Derek Balmer, in Toronto, we brought Dr. John Grinder, the co founder of NLP, to Toronto twice to do trainings. And I did the master practitioner course in NLP New Code, Grinder's model of it, which is great. And then became an NLP trainer, which was a 2-year course, and kept doing all these trainings. But Derek Balmer hired me as his hypnosis gunfighter because he wanted a really good hypnosis trainer. And so he took me on to train for him. And then I think it was 1993, prior to that, I started doing hypnotherapy because I had all these different trainings and so on. I was very used to doing hypnosis. So I specialized in brief therapy in Toronto. I had a practice, a lot of phobias, anxieties, chronic grief, trauma, all of that stuff, and developed a number of protocols for working with these. Remember, I said to you a few minutes ago, Veronica, I said, I'll get to that point. Because I didn't know the limits of the model, I had adopted Richard Bandler's protocol, which was this: pretend there are no limits because you'll run into them eventually. But if you give yourself limits, that's where you're going to be stuck. So I was doing stuff on stage. I was at a place called Georgian College, north of Toronto. So this would be 1980s. And at that time, after the show, a man came up to me with his wife and another young man, and he was an elderly man and very, very stuffy, very English. I won't say his name, but he said, "Oh, I'm so and so. I'm sure you've heard of me." And I said, "Honestly, I haven't." He said, "Well, I'm the best hypnotist in the world." I said, "Oh, okay, that's cool. You may be, you may not, I don't know." And he said, "What you're doing is wrong." Whoa, what? He said, "What you're doing is wrong." I thought he meant morally wrong, and I couldn't figure it out. But he meant structurally wrong. He said, "You're taking away people's names so they can't remember them, but you're doing it without a hypnotic trance, and that's wrong." And I said, "But it works." He said, "That doesn't matter. You shouldn't do it." So I was coming up with my own models, my own ways of doing stuff because
okay.
nobody told me what the limits were. And so when I started doing therapy with it, then began doing the trainings. And when Chris Thompson and I created Mike Mandel Hypnosis Academy in the Ericksonian purple in this particular shirt, we began seeing people come from around the world to train with us. And what our specialty is we create excellent general practitioners. And if they then want to go on and specialize, that's fine. But we had psychiatrists come to train with us from Singapore and France and Western Canada and Australia. And when psychiatrists come and up their game by learning the techniques, you're doing something that's getting people's attention. So my thing was I stopped doing therapy in 2000. We lost our space. I did a lot of self-therapy. I think every therapist has the job and the responsibility of doing the self-work, and it never stops. We keep working till eternity, and to be the best person we can be, the most loving, careful. I'm not there yet, but to keep doing the self-work so we become an empty vessel to help other people. And so I stopped doing therapy in 2000. That's when Derek Balmer died. And shortly after we began, I was still doing shows back then until actually next week is 6 years since I quit the stage and quit performing, quit doing lectures. But Chris and I began working together, I think 12 years ago now. We've done 250 brain software podcasts and created hundreds and hundreds of videos. And we become sort of
are amazing.
The Netflix of hypnosis. So you join our account, click and just learn and go on.
I love your energy when you two guys are together. It's just like, whoa, it's amazing. Honestly,
it's not quite as easy coming up to 71 as it used to be, but I think the music keeps me young.
You look pretty fit to me. Look at, oh my God, my son is actually a tattoo. My son is a tattoo artist in Norway.
Oh, no way. I couldn't see that.
Norway and Latvia, actually. Yeah.
Oh, nice. I'm just trying to see my tattoo show. Oh, there it is. It's underneath. It's doing great. I can't see it. But I can see it on my arm. In Latvia and Norway, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, he was kind of between the two countries, but now they're actually moving to Latvia because their son is coming to the school age, and so they want the wee guy grow up in Latvia. So
I hear how long have you been in Ireland? Because I hear the tiniest hints of Irish accent with you.
I know, 24 years.
There you go. That explains it.
Yeah.
That explains it.
Listen, Mike, as you started talking about stage hypnosis, that's kind of like your life started with hypnosis. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what, like, you were much younger then and you didn't have that much experience. What's your opinion now on the using hypnosis in entertainment business?
That's excellent.
Sales, television.
Yeah, it's great because it's happening anyway. It's happening every time we turn on the television. And it's happening every time we watch an advertisement. You know, hypnosis is everywhere. And the great thing about stage hypnosis, like the late Tad James said, is it makes a lot of people aware of how powerful it is, people who need therapy. And it's an amazing method for therapy. I mean, some people abuse it. Some people do so-called X-rated hypnosis shows, which are more about alcohol and young audiences than anything else. So my cat just freaked out, said thundered right outside my window. Sorry, buddy, I'm here. I have my Egyptian Mao cat sitting behind me here, and he just.
Oh.
But yeah, and I think stage hypnosis shows if they're ethical, if you're letting people leave the stage feeling better than when they came up, that's a great thing. And it's a wonderful thing to explain what's happening. But remember, I just said that, Veronica, it is everywhere. And an example is my wife and I were at one of Canada's main banks, downtown Toronto, and we were in line waiting for service. And I saw a poster on the wall, and it was entirely hypnotic, because this is what it said. And I can't believe they get away with this stuff. It said, let me get the exact wording for you. It said, borrow to get ahead so you don't fall behind. Now, isn't borrowing going further into debt? And isn't going further into debt falling further behind in anyone's estimation? But
that's
people,
amazing. Yeah. Wow. And many people wouldn't see that.
No, most people don't. I did an entire podcast on it because I was a police trainer too. I taught the advanced interviewing module. I was a forensic hypnotist. I still am technically, work on major crimes, robberies, 3 murder cases, poisoning, sex offenses. We caught a guy in a sex offense. And using hypnosis by creating a protocol that cannot cause paramnesia, false memory syndrome. And that's always the problem. If you can use a protocol that cannot create false memories, then hypnosis can be very powerful in court cases.
So can you maybe share your techniques, how you
The method?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. There was a case north of Toronto many years ago, and it was a woman. We're going to call her Louise because that was her name. And she has given me permission to use her name. And she was a woman who worked at a women's shelter, and where they helped battered and abused women get out of bad relationships. So there were 2 beds there. And that particular night, there was no one staying at the shelter. So she locked up at 11 p.m. and went to her car in the alleyway. And she didn't know she was being stalked by a psycho. And here's what made it terrifying. She's a little woman. This enormous guy, 6'1", whatever, 6 feet tall, was wearing a dress. He was in drag. So he had a dress on, the exact same fabric she was wearing that day. He had a wig, like her hairstyle. He had facial makeup on. And so obviously he'd been closely tracking her and following her for some time.
Mm-hmm.
And he attempted to rape this woman. And she fought back. And I tell everybody, as a police trainer, I say, fight back immediately, fight for your life right away. Don't wait for a better opportunity, because if you are taken to a secondary crime scene, your chance of escape is almost non-existent. Fight to the death instantly and let him pick somebody else. So she fought back and he fled. And York Regional Police north of Toronto had went over to her and they interviewed her, and they gave her 16 photographs, 4/4s, that came out of the police system, which fits perpetrators who would fit that description of that crime within, I believe it was 30 kilometers, I might be wrong on that, for that kind of crime, because in order to track and stalk someone, you have to be pretty close. You can't drive, 100 miles every day. And so he'd been clearly stalking her. And so what happened was, she looked at the 16 pictures and said, I don't know. She said he had makeup, a wig. They said, well, can you remember? She said, I can't tell what he looked like. It was dark. He had makeup, he had a wig. I don't know. So they gave up on that. And 5 weeks later, they called me and said, are you willing to work with this woman? She's open to it, to see if she can recall which guy it was. So all of these 16 were people out on parole, people who'd served their time, all of these things. And so we met 1 week after that, so 6 weeks after the crime, at the women's shelter, which is where she felt safest. And they brought in a police videographer, 2 police interviewers, and a female police officer as well, because you have to do everything above board and be seen to be above board as well. We're using hypnosis, right? So they set up the camera, and they set up 2 chairs for her and the interviewer, and I'm off to the side, sort of in the picture, but not really. So my method does not ask the subject anything about the crime ever. Not before the hypnosis, not during, and not after. I never discuss it. And I've never had to go to court for hypnosis, which is the way it should be. If you're doing a good job, you should never have to give testimony in court. So what I'm looking for is evidence that they can corroborate afterwards that this is actually happened. So I begin doing a conversational Ericksonian induction. And she goes into trance very quickly. But unfortunately, so does the detective beside her, who's going to interview her. And the 2 of them are just, so the police videographer was very clever. He moved the camera so the detective was not in the scene. And so I do the hypnosis, and it's all done by metaphor. You're going on a beautiful guided imagery journey. You're walking along a lovely beach. It's clean and fresh, and your feet in the water and in the sand, and you're looking down. And it said, and you find something shiny in the sand. You pick it up, and it's a very old-fashioned skeleton key. And you decide to take it with you. So she does. And now you go up on the sand dunes and you see a house, and it's an old house. But now listen to the framework here, Veronica. It is a very safe, very comfortable, warm house. And you feel very good there. Because I don't know if she had something scary in a house as a kid, an old house. So she goes in, just explore the house. You love looking around, and there's drawers and cupboards for you to explore. And you can, here's the embedded command, find what you need to find. That's it. We let her look around the house. And you'll only come back to the surface when you have found what you need to find. So this is now, awakening is now contingent upon finding the information. So we wait. 3 minutes later, and all I'm saying for 3 minutes is, that's right. That's right. Keep looking around. That's right. Really, occasionally.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes her like 3 minutes. She comes out of trance. It took the detective nearly 9 minutes to come out of trance. And I always joke and say, I don't know what the heck he remembered. So he comes out of hypnosis, and she does, and now they do the interview. I don't. And all they said was, take a look at these 16 photographs again and tell me if you can tell who it was. She goes like this. She picks up the sheet of paper and she goes, it was him. That fast, like 2 seconds. And they would, wait a minute, you got to think it was, I don't have to think about anything. It was him. I know it was him. Okay, so the skeptical police find out where he's currently living, and they show up at his doorstep 6 weeks after the event. And he comes running out of the house in his pajamas and a bathrobe. And he said, I'm so glad you're here. I knew you were going to catch me. The stress has been killing me. I knew you were going to catch me. I need help. They said, we got to read your rights. Read anything you want. Just get me some help. So it turns out this man was producing 15 times too much testosterone. And that was driving this insane sexual urge. Okay. And so he underwent chemical castration at the Clark Institute of Psychiatry in Toronto. And I was teaching this at the New York State Troopers Police Academy in New York State. And they were skeptical when I told how it all worked out. And amazingly, a man stood up in the room. I won't say his name because I don't know his permission. But I'll tell you off camera if you like, so you can look him up. Mm. He was a forensic psychiatrist and an Ontario Provincial Police man. And he said, I can confirm this. I am the psychiatrist who did the chemical castration in that case. And it was just amazing. I mean, everything just fit in place. We found out he and I were both born the same day, Wednesday, April 29, 1953. And that case dealt with that guy, and the woman gave me permission to tell the story. And it was certainly one of the most interesting.
Wow. In your opinion, and from your experience, what's so special about hypnotherapy compared to regular talk therapy?
Right. Well, the most common form of therapy today is CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and people do a lot of, thinking differently, behaving differently, and it will work. I mean, I'm not against CBT. I think it does a great work, and I've shown a lot of people how to use some methods from it and have a great result. But if you have a fragment of shrapnel in a wound, going back to a significant event in the past, no amount of thinking differently, this is just my opinion, or feeling differently about it is going to get rid of it. You have to get in and pull out the shrapnel and clean out the wound. And that's one of the wonderful things that hypnotherapy will do. We can depotentiate the effects of the past and bring the person to a place of resolution. And then we can bring in new resources. And that's why hypnosis, good hypnotherapy, is practiced by people like Roy Hunter today, another friend of mine. In the past, Gil Boyne, who Charles Tebbets learned from, and Dave Ellman. They were getting to the source of the problem. So when Ellman got somebody who stuttered, he didn't say, oh, you just learn to do speech therapy, learn to speak more clear. No, he'd take them back and say, what was the very first time this happened? So we're following a somatic bridge back to the very first event. Well, I was in school and the teacher said, what, cat got your tongue? And I couldn't speak clearly from that moment. Now we depotentiate all the negative charge from the past. And by and large, in a case like that, the stuttering will disappear. And so the advantage of hypnotherapy is we are the special forces of therapy. We go in fast. Hopefully we do very good, very thorough work and check our work, and we jump back out again and set the person free to lead a good life. We had a Toronto psychiatrist who was head of psychiatry at a major Toronto hospital, came and trained with me because he didn't want to keep prescribing drugs. He didn't want to have to give people medication. He wanted ways of getting in and healing them. And hypnosis is so natural and so powerful. It is an immensely effective means of therapy.
And it's so old as well. Like, it's been used for centuries.
Yes. Yes, we can track it back to stories told around the fire in ancient tribes, and drumming that creates trances, and dancing will create trances, and all of these things. And people's racial heritage was preserved through the stories, but there are also stories of healing. There are metaphors of healing. And to be able to tell someone a story and see them go into a hypnotic state and not realize I'm using Ericksonian hypnosis and hypnotizing them. I'll give you a case. I was flying to Boston from Toronto to do a keynote for a corporation, 1-hour keynote, staying overnight. And on the way there, sitting in the aisle, because I'm always in the aisle, the woman next to me was an elderly woman. I'm saying elderly because I was in my early 60s and I think she was in her late 70s. And she was an Irish woman. And she said she was going to Boston because that was her favorite place that she and her husband used to go to all the time. The big Irish population in Massachusetts, the Kennedys, you know, there's a huge Irish American population. And her husband had passed away a couple of years before. And she wanted to go and revisit the places that were important to the two of them alone. But she was concerned, she had a bit of trepidation that it was going to upset her. And I said to her, you know, reminds me of a story I once heard. I can't remember the metaphor. I was generating it on the fly. And she sits there and her lower lip size increases and her lips are apart. And she's staring at the back of the seat in front of her. And at the end, we finished the story and the plane landed and I helped her with her luggage. And she said to me, "You're a wonderful young man. Can I pray for you?" I said, "Sure."
Wow.
She was Roman Catholic and I'm a Presbyterian. I was actually a Presbyterian elder. And so it's like, but I said, "Of course you can. That'll be wonderful." And she held my hands and she prayed for me, called me young man, which I thought was wonderful. And then she went and got her baggage and out of the carousel. And I saw her leave. And as she was leaving, she said, "You know, I don't know what we were talking about. Can't remember, but I'm not at all worried about going there now." And I said, "That's right." Yeah, that's as hypnotic as a formal session. But to be able to talk to someone over a beer or a meal and see them transformed, that's the stuff I really like. And the downside is, of course, we never get the credit, but the good side is, who cares? If they're feeling better and functioning better, that's the most important.
Yeah. And so people often think that they may lose control while they're in hypnosis.
Right,
But
right.
it's quite opposite, isn't it?
Yes,
So
it is.
if you could tell
Okay,
something about that.
there we are. Yeah, people say, well, you know, I don't want people to come up to my office when I had the office in Toronto. I had a great office. I was right near Lake Ontario in an upscale part of Toronto called the Beaches. And I always book 90-minute appointments because typically you fix anything in an hour, but 90 minutes meant they weren't going to be running into somebody else. There was nobody waiting when they were coming out. And I'd go and get a Starbucks and walk along the lake a bit. But back then, people would often say, because they had seen me on stage doing a stage show, well, I want to be hypnotized, but I don't want to quack like a duck, you know, or bark like a tree. And I'd say, well, when you saw that in someone's show, were they forced to come up there? No. Did they volunteer? Yeah. Did they know they were at a hypnosis show? Yeah. So that was the perfect context for that to happen. But if you tell someone to quack like a duck in a hypnotherapy session, they're not going to do it because it's not the right context. And I would always explain, yes, hypnosis is mind control, but it's your mind that's in control, not mine. And anytime you didn't like it, you could just come out of trance and say, you do all the work. And that was one of the key things when I was a therapist, Veronica, is I would always make sure the client knew it was their responsibility to do the work and to change. I couldn't do it for them. And when a client is properly motivated, we remove all the blockages and they can fly into a very powerful change and have a wonderful life.
Yeah, see, I often compare hypnosis with magic, okay? And that's just an easy way to explain to some people. And any magic can be used in a good way and in a bad way.
Sure.
Isn't that right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so is hypnosis, you know, if it's in the wrong hands, it can be misused. And so how, maybe you can explain to people how to find the correct hypnotherapist.
Well, the first thing to do is look at the recommendations. Word of mouth is the best. I never advertised, but I had more clients than I could possibly work with because I was doing very clean, very careful work and getting really good results. But the thing is, people need to educate themselves on the aspects of control. And when people are emotional, they're more open to suggestion. It's just the way it is. And nefarious governments in history, ever since Edwin Bernays, Freud's nephew, have learned the different means of control. And if you keep a population afraid, they will do what they're told. And governments worldwide have always done this. I lectured NATO forces at the, what is it called? The Canadian Armed Forces College in Toronto. And they were very interested in this. They wanted to know, like, how the mind control aspects work. And the best defense against them is knowing about them. if you know that if you're very emotional, you're vulnerable to suggestion, you'll be very careful at those times to back away. And one of the best examples of this, Veronica, is I had one of our podcasts. I wanted to talk about very controversial things happening in the world, but our podcast is always politically neutral. We're Switzerland. We don't get involved in politics at all. We don't look at controversy. We just give people a good time and teach them something useful. And so I wanted to teach the control aspects that were hypnotic, that were being used worldwide at that time. And in order to do it, I used the example of Gordon Ramsay and Hell's Kitchen, the show, because the same techniques were used in that show. Now, I love Gordon Ramsay. I think he's an amazing chef and a fascinating person, but the techniques in that show were identical to the ones that are used to control people. You divide them, first of all. You have your red team and your blue team. So you build in rivalries and you mistrust the other team. And when people do well, you give them immense rewards. You bomb them with love. And when people don't do what they're supposed to do, you withdraw the love. And they have punishments and have to stay up cleaning the kitchen for 5 hours instead of going to bed. And there's a whole series of things here that are used to control people. And it's all hypnotic. I mean, it really is. You watch advertisements. None of them are by accident. They're all tied to the material that you're watching at that time. I don't watch regular television anymore. My wife and I watch movies. We're very
Same
careful.
here.
Yeah, we're careful what we watch because
Yeah.
I don't want things getting past my critical faculty
Yeah.
without knowing about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's all hypnosis.
Yeah.
I think the best thing too, the antidote is to get people to learn to ask questions. My 2 Jedi questions I use a lot when people are in religious cults or being controlled by a spouse who is, and we run into that a lot, who's extremely controlling. Is ask them these same 2 questions. They say, oh, but he's a really good person. I always say the joke, because emotions make us open to suggestion, even good emotions. Our friend Freddie Jacquin, his mantra is a great one. He says, create an emotion, give a suggestion. And that works. And so somebody has a spouse who's abusive, and I joke and say, yes, Dad, I know he was in prison for 18 years and he's a psychopath, but he brought me some wonderful strawberries from the market. And just how people can shift and not look at the evidence of their own senses. So the questions I always ask, the 2 Jedi questions are, how did you come to believe that? Whatever it is, bizarre religious beliefs, controlling things, governments, whatever. How did you come to believe that? I don't attack them. I just ask. And they say, well, from this. And then I would say, how do you know it's true? What is your epistemology? What is your evidence criteria that you know this is true? And if people say, well, I just know. So now you're going by a feeling. You're running your life on a feeling. Hitler thought it was a good thing to invade Poland. He was wrong. He plunged the world into war. Our feelings are not accurate guides. So I always use careful questioning to get people to think again.
How do you deal with resistance?
With
Resistance.
Well, again, questions break through everything, because you can't resist someone who agrees with you. If you say, oh, that's interesting. I learned not to argue with people by aligning with them instead of against them, even sitting next to them instead of right across them. That's why my hypnosis students have taught them, never sit directly across someone when you're doing hypnosis. It's too confrontational. It's not a technique by a police officer, and it's a convict trick. It's called the left eye technique. And I taught this to police at the Ontario Police College and numerous other places in New York and Virginia. When we are talking to each other as humans, now we're probably getting this reversed because of the image on screen, but we tend to look at the person's right eye. And we look away and we talk and we look back at their right eye and away. Now, what convicts do is they invade your personal space suddenly and they stare into your left eye instead. And this sends an incredible message of aggression and dominance. In fact, one of my favorite films with Kevin Spacey and Gabriel Byrne was The Usual Suspects. And near the beginning of the film, there's some convicts locked in a jail being held by the police. And 2 of them try to left eye each other at the same time. Their left eyes are literally overlapped, 3 inches apart. They're trying to intimidate each other. I thought whoever wrote that script knew what he or she was doing. And I would demonstrate this when I do a police lecture. Bring a big scary cop up to the front. I just talk to him. I'm looking at his right eye. And I say, you know, try to talk me to something. Well, we have to leave now. No, I don't want to leave. And he's still trying. And then I suddenly blank my face, step in close, and look right into his left eye. And I said, I told you, or something like that. And cops even say, whoa, that was freaky. It sends this incredible wave of dominance. And so, as I tell my jujitsu students, if you're going to do this, make sure you've got the skills in case it escalates, because it very quickly can. But all of these psychological tools are tied to hypnosis. They're all connected with getting in past the critical faculty, putting our information in instead of what's currently there, clearing up the past. I mean, we have so many tools we can use, but the bottom line is, being an Ericksonian, I speak in terms of the unconscious rather than subconscious, but hypnosis builds a bridge to the unconscious mind. And we do it with the good intentions. And I think the best intention we can have as therapists, or I'm not a therapist anymore, I only teach them, but if we treat that other person as someone who's important and highly valued and honestly care about them, that comes through, and we'll do stellar hypnosis work.
What do you think of an online therapy?
Online therapy,
Yeah,
it can be fantastic.
comparing to the one-to-one
Right. One-to-one is always the best.
person.
Yeah, because even with the best, you know, Zoom connection, the super high-end computers at both ends, and
It has to
remarkable.
be very good internet.
Yeah, you've really got to see I want to take in the entire person with my peripheral vision. I want to notice breathing shifts and subtle facial tonus changes, all of these things, because if I'm not getting the feedback signals from them, I'm not going to proceed accurately. Having said that, there's a wide variety of methodologies like mindscaping and mirroring hands and some great stuff that you can use online and have a great result. It's just never quite as good. I'd say if face-to-face is a 10 out of 10, online's probably about an 8 out of 10.
Mm.
You can still fix a lot of stuff with an 8 out of 10.
Meditation versus hypnosis, hypnotherapy.
Yeah, I get asked that question quite a bit. Not hypnotherapy so much as hypnosis, but the point is, people ask, is meditation, hypnosis, meditation are the same? Well, all meditation is hypnotic. It's all creating alpha waves or theta waves. The Zen mystics uniformly tend to produce theta waves, but we can get that with the hypnotic trance anyway. So all meditation tends to be hypnotic, but not all hypnosis is meditation. All trout are fish, but not all fish are trout.
Yeah, I agree. I just look through what else.
You had some great questions here.
Yeah, I had many, but I'm just watching the time. Because I don't want to miss something important with you.
My hypnotist office.
Any news coming up in science regarding hypnosis, hypnotherapy?
Yes, and that's a very good question. I think it's really the biggest change we're seeing. I actually wrote something on this blog post. We are seeing, and I wrote it for Freddie Jacquin for his new book. He asked me to write a chapter for him. But the thing is, what I'm seeing now, we're seeing an evolution organically happening in hypnosis. And I think if someone is a good hypnotist, well trained, they will replicate that roughly same sequence of transformation in their own hypnotic techniques. So people tend to start very direct, very much the way Braid would have done it, or Bernheim or Lebo, in suggestive therapeutics. Everything they did in the 1880s was direct suggestion in hypnosis. They still got phenomenal results. But the problem is, Erickson took it beyond that. He used to be so direct. And then he, instead of being the one in control, cause, effect, created a psychodynamic loop with the subject, where the two of you are exchanging information and trance between you. And that was far more effective because it allows the unconscious of the subject to unpack trance states and resources and all of these things. Well, the newer forms of therapy are moving away from the hyper-directive stuff, and they're much more organic, they're much more client-focused, and much more client solution. We believe that the client does not only have the problem, but also possesses the resources to fix it. So how do we interact with that person psychodynamically so they are not just being told a suggestion that's going in past their critical faculty into the deep mind, but are interacting, unpacking past memories that are useful, listening to stories. And so I see three things right now that are leading that way very, very quickly. First one is clean language. So David Grove's clean language is clearly hypnotic because it draws the attention internally. Grove isn't with us anymore, but people like Judy Rees are keeping it going, and it's great. So the person speaks in metaphors and said, "Oh, I just, my house feels like a firestorm." And then you say, "What kind of firestorm is that?" And you start to unpack the metaphor and then immediately move it towards solutions. So what would you like to happen? What would you like to have happen? Well, I'd like someone to come and put the fire out with a bucket of water. What kind of bucket of water? Well, a really big one where we can, and by unpacking the metaphors, the person spontaneously has an aha moment and often fixes their problem. It's hypnotic. Well, the second one is my own mindscaping, where we poll the unconscious mind of the subject to determine the key to the problem. So we figure the unconscious mind knows the best solution if we can just get it moving. And so instead of delivering an Ericksonian metaphor, which is great if you're Milton Erickson, but most of us don't have his hypnotic powers, and he could tell a story and the person's problems would disappear, they change their life and so on. But if we just throw a story at someone and talk in a gravelly voice and sit in a wheelchair, we're not being Milton Erickson. So I started thinking, what if we use the unconscious mind of the subject to present the solution to us in the form of a metaphor? And that's what mindscaping does. The unconscious mind of the subject gives us the key that will unlock the problem. And it's startling. We create an internal mindscape, which is a map that the client interacts with in their imagination, in front of them and behind them and off to the sides. And by changing the map, their problem disappears as well. So that's very client-centered too. It's very little the hypnosis expert is doing. It's everything's coming from the client. And the third one is probably the most indirect of all, and that's mirroring hands, created by Ernest Rossi, Erickson's protege, and my friend, Dr. Richard Hill. Well, he's about to be Dr. Richard Hill. He's doing his PhD now. And Hill and Rossi came up with this absolutely amazing method with mirroring hands, which I'm trained in. But the idea that the client and the hypnotist co-create a solution. And the hypnotist can start with just no induction, just drawing the person's attention to their hands. Have you ever really looked at your hands? And they do, and how unusual they are and how they help you interact with the world. And I wonder if that problem you've been telling me about could be taken on by one of those hands, maybe warmer or heavier, and the person goes into trance, and that one hand takes the problem. And the whole interaction is so little. Richard Hill, I'd seen him work with people, he might just go, yeah, just that. And the person's arms are moving all over the place. They're finding solutions and installing them and getting profound response, because it's the whole thing we believe who are doing indirect stuff. Do not lead the witness. We let the witness, the subject, generate their own response rather than imposing upon them what we think it should be.
Mike, have you had any clients with attention deficit? And another thing is dementia.
I've worked not with dementia, I worked with strokes, and I worked with attention deficit. I worked with ADHD, ADD. There was a Toronto pediatrician at Toronto Sick Children's Hospital, and it's one of the premier children's hospitals in the world. I mean, it's really world class. He's from Vienna and trained there and came over to Canada, really nice pediatrician. But he had nothing for the kids other than to offer them Ritalin and Dexedrine, and he said, I've got so many patients on Ritalin, Dexedrine, whatever. And I said, do the parents want them on it? He said, no, they hate it. I said, do you want them on it? He said, no, I can't stand it. I said, then why are they on it? Listen to this. The teachers at school were telling them they needed to be on it. So the teachers are recommending a drug for a kid. They've got a little boy. Oh, he's acting up in school. He's looking around. He's talking to people. He needs to be on Ritalin. He's ADHD or ADD. And so you have teachers making a medical diagnosis, or did then anyway, this is what I ran into, and wanting to medicate a little boy into being quiet and calm, even though he's not a little girl, he's a little boy. Little boys have testosterone and they're more rambunctious, and that's normal. And so he wanted me to work with some of his patients. He sent me maybe about 8 over the years. And the protocol I used was this. We did not see attention deficit as a disorder. We saw it as not even an attention deficit. We saw it as too much attention. Everything gets their attention. Oh, shiny object, squirrel. What did you say? Everything is catching their attention. And so by taking that further, it's what Dr. Tad James said, and I think he was completely correct. He said, ADD appears to be the inability to go into trance. That's all it is. That's that model. And that's what my model is. Just saying it's a model, but it's a useful one because most kids can go into class and sit and zone out and still get good grades. But the ADD kids are looking at everything and talking and they're not focusing. So my method of treatment was I bring the child in, find a way of getting them into trance despite the fact that they're not able to focus very well because everything's pulling their attention away. And I'll give you an example in a second. So then we install a trance. He and I, or she and I, install a trance. So I think it was everyone was a little boy I dealt with. And then I give him post-hypnotic. So when he goes into class, sits down, he puts his hand on his chin, he zones out, goes into a daydream, which is his trance state. And guess what happens? The kids' grade levels go up. Almost immediately, they start getting better in one semester. And what sometimes happened was the teachers would then complain because the problem in their mind wasn't that the grades have gone up. He's not paying attention. He's zoning out. He's daydreaming. It's like, you can't fix stupid. I've said that for years. You cannot fix stupid. But to see how hard it is to get kids with ADD, ADHD in a trance, you have to find a method. And there was a very noteworthy case came into my office. His mother brought him in. She hadn't even noticed he'd come in wearing his bedroom slippers. I mean, just flew out. And she said, we have a big house. He's got a tricycle upstairs. The kid was about 8 or 9, I guess. I don't know. Can't remember. Riding his tricycle up and down at 11 p.m., kicking a soccer ball around, bouncing off the walls. And sometimes it would just stop. And she'd wait a few minutes and go up, and he'd be fast asleep. And she said, some nights he just goes to sleep right away. I don't know how he does it. I said, have you ever asked him? She said, no. I said, well, he's sitting here. Why don't you ask him? She said, well, Eric, how do you fall asleep quickly those nights? He said, oh, that's easy. I love cats. And he said, when the cat is on the bed, I want her to stay. So I stay still and I wake up and it's morning. That's it. He's now given me the entire way to do therapy with him. And Nancy Rinaldi, my friend who was a physical therapist in the same office, we shared it, had a picture of a cat on the wall. I said, Eric, do you know what an neurophile is? He said, no. I said, somebody who loves cats. I said, I'm an neurophile too. I love cats. I always have my whole life. Cats love me, always. Even nasty cats love me. He said, I'm like that too. I said, do you like Nancy's cat in that picture? He said, yeah, that's a nice cat. I said, close your eyes. Pretend that cat jumps up in your lap and you don't want that cat to move. Bang, 30 seconds. He's in a powerful trance. We install the programming and the rest is history.
Wow. I was asking because as many therapists that I've been asking about this, majority wouldn't take ADHD clients.
Yep.
And why I'm interested in dementia, because I was caring for my mom for 3 years with dementia, and I did start doing some things with her, you know, and I was always, we always had healing music in the house. And even though she was very, she just couldn't sit still. You know, she was constantly on the move. But with the music, she actually could relax.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just interesting.
That's nice. And, you know, we know so little about neuroplasticity. I know if we're looking at new neural pathways, we're creating protein kinase C, which builds them in. And one of the things, I obviously, because I'm not a medical doctor, I can't prescribe, but I was very careful what I said. I don't prescribe, I didn't diagnose, and I never treated for serious problems. But I could say to the person, you know, friends of mine have found it really, really useful to take fish oil for the brain. I'm not saying, and I'll even say, I'm not telling you that you should take it too, because I can't prescribe, so I would never say that. And you know, anything like that, when I work with stroke victims, I get them thinking about the possibility of taking omega-3 fish oil as well. Not the full spectrum. We get too much 6. We have enough 9, but the 3 is the one we need. And supporting the brain, like you said with the healing music. I mean, that's freaking brilliant, because you're finding in all the different modalities the things that help and work together. And so right on with that one.
Mike, I can't believe it's an hour.
I know it's quick, isn't it? It's that wonderful time distortion when we talk about hypnosis.
I know, it's just, time is just flying.
I've actually, if you have the time, I actually have about 10 more minutes, according to my clock.
Okay. I'm just going through the questions here. Common misconceptions. That's very common question.
Yeah, that's common misconceptions about hypnosis, you know, that you can get stuck in hypnosis. My friend Sean Michael Andrews, who bills himself as the world's fastest hypnotist, and he says that with no degree of pride. He's a lovely man, an excellent hypnotist. And the reason he says it, he says, and when you've taken my training, he said, you'll be the world's fastest hypnotist too. So it's really clever. But he talks about that. He has a 1-minute talk he gives, and he can do it in less than 1 minute, and it dispels all of that misconception. You know, you won't take your clothing off. You know, people, why do I take my clothes? You won't do that unless you normally do it in public. So it's totally different from it. You're not going to do something you don't want to do. You will either resist and come out of hypnosis, or you'll just ignore me completely and won't do it. You know, no one can make you violate your moral code under hypnosis. No one can make you reveal things you don't want to talk about. This idea, what will you tell me? It's funny, because many years ago, I was in Kingston, Ontario. I used to do a lot of, you know, I did nearly 5,000 hypnosis shows around the world, 3 continents. And when I was near the Toronto area, Kingston is about 3 hours east of Toronto. There was a nice big bar there called Stages I used to work at and get a packed house. And I was going to the front door, and these 2 guys came over. They looked like bikers, scary guys. Mike Mandel? I went, yes. And they said, can we talk to you for a minute? I went, okay. So I went down the alleyway. I pull out badges. They're both police. Plainclothes police from a different police force, and they've been seconded to them because nobody knew them in Kingston. And they said, there's a guy here we're following. He's come to your show tonight. We have reason to believe he's, you know, done whatever crime. It was a murder, actually, because that was one of the 3. And I said, yeah. And they said, he's the kind of person that's a very good chance he'll volunteer. If he does, are you able to hypnotize him? Bring him backstage afterwards, re-hypnotize him so we can interview him and find out if he did the crime. I said, no, absolutely not. First of all, it's completely unethical to bring him backstage and attempt to do something. Secondly, he wouldn't do it. He's not going to reveal anything. People lie under hypnosis just as readily as they lie any other time. We keep our protective mechanisms in place. And when people realize that they're going in and out of trance all the time, a lot of the fear disappears, a lot of the concerns. Because Dave Ellman said there's only one thing that will keep a subject out of hypnosis, and that is fear, the only thing. And so if we deal with the fear, then there's no problem.
Mike, you're incredible.
Funny you should say that. Because 2 reasons. First of all, my wife, I told her if I ever believe my own hype, put a gun to my head and pull the trigger. And she said, don't worry, honey, I will. And the other one is when I started performing in 1975, that was my poster. I was incredible, Mike Mandel.
Wow.
And that was back then.
So you are incredible.
It was only a title, not reality.
Mike, as much I could get, you don't do therapy any longer. You just teach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Teach people to replicate excellence. And every week we get emails and messages from our students around the world saying, I got one on Saturday. A woman's a therapist in England. She started in her 60s, had never done hypnosis. She's producing amazing results. And a woman she knows had ovarian cancer, was really ill, was taking morphine twice a day, had to go to a clinic to get it twice a day. And she took away the woman's pain completely with hypnosis. She didn't need paracetamol, nothing. And just her emotion in her voice, she said, I cannot thank you enough. No, I can't thank her enough. She's got superpowers now. She paid attention. And we're changing the world one person at a time.
Yeah, that's like, do you know that story about the starfish and the boy on the beach?
Yes, I used it when I keynote at Hypnothoughts Live. Yeah. Yeah, it's a great one.
So if people want to reach out to you for studies for learning hypnotherapy?
Yes, we have a wonderful training
And
online.
who should do it? Who should do it?
Everybody. Hypnosis is a life skill. So like I
Yeah.
said, in our class, we've had doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists, dentists, but we've had people who clean swimming pools for a living, and musicians, and house husbands and housewives, and anybody who wants to learn these remarkable communication skills. Mike Mandel, hypnosis.com, and Mandel is Mandel, one L only. And we do a free trial right now. People can test drive our academy, absolutely free. We don't even want your credit card, nothing. And you can see the hundreds of videos. And what makes us different is we have practice rooms that are open 24 hours a day. And we also have trainings we have brought in from our colleagues, Melissa Tiers, Freddie and Anthony Jacqueline, James Tripp, David Snyder, Michael C. Anthony. These people come in and do guest trainings for us. And we have material in our academy from them as well. And so all the top people stick together, support each other. You want to check out Hypnosis and what we specialize in, including our live classes. I teach a lot of trainers, not a lot, let's say a number of trainers from other systems who develop bad habits and have weak technique. And we bring them in and find the flaw in their technique and turn them loose on the world. Fantastic. It's the best job.
Your energy, guys, you and Chris, it's just it comes across really, really incredible.
It's great to work with
Amazing.
you, best friend.
Yeah. And thank you so much for coming this evening. And maybe it's morning somewhere else.
Somewhere else, yes.
Yeah.
It's 2 in the
evening here.
afternoon here in Toronto. We're in the middle of a big thunderstorm here, but we stayed online, so that's good.
But not only the power of hypnotherapy, but it's the power of the technology that, you are in Toronto, I'm in Ireland, and, people somewhere else can watch and listen. And thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in and listening, and do whatever you do with all the clicks and shares, helping us to enlighten people about the incredible healing properties of hypnosis and hypnotherapy.
That's wonderful. Let me leave you with my benediction. And as you go forth from this meeting with all the understandings that you have gleaned in an effortless and enjoyable way, make sure that you install all the deep learning so that you will manifest all your own destiny with consummate skill. That's right.
Great. Thank you very much, Mike.
Thanks
Maybe
again.
you can stay for a minute.
Sure.